hop on. Welcome to our panel today. We'll begin very shortly. Hope everyone is having a great day. We have a really exciting panel planned for everyone. Give everybody just about one more minute, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to those of you just joining. Giving some time for everyone to make sure they're on and ready. All right, I'll go ahead and kick us off. So as I was saying, hello and welcome to today's APS panel. It's entitled Exploring Career Pathways in Industry. I'll be serving as your moderator today. My name is Dr. Michelle King. I'm a longtime member of the American Physiological Society and a member of the APS Physiology and Industry Committee. In today's session, our panelists will discuss how they successfully transitioned into industry through mindful use of personal branding, networking best practices, and proactive engagement with mentors. But before we get started, I do have a few housekeeping notes for you. I know we had our little slide up earlier, but for those of you just joining, out of respect for our presenters, our speakers, we ask that you refrain from photo or video captures of the presentation in whole or in part. The session will be recorded and available for future viewing, so you can check that out. A link on the registration website will be available. Recording of and taking photographs of another person's presentation without their explicit permission is prohibited, so be aware of that. At this time, all attendees except for the speakers are in listen-only mode and video is off. So as the moderator, I am excited and happy to raise the questions that are entered into the Q&A function. So that's where I'll be checking. If you have any questions, I'll answer them on a first come, first served basis. So please go ahead and type those in. Anything that comes up to the top of your head, just go ahead and type that in and we will revisit it as soon as we get a moment. This session will end at approximately 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. Okay. All right. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our panelists. So I'll give a brief introduction and they can give you a little tidbit about themselves. So Dr. Alencia Washington, who conducted her graduate work in the Department of Physiology and Biophysics at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, focused on the regulation of integrins and other adhesion molecules by glycosylation during various physiological and pathological states. After receiving her PhD, Dr. Washington returned to Vanderbilt to complete a postdoctoral fellowship. She joined WellStar Health Systems in Marietta, Georgia, and is the leader of WellStar Research Institute in 2021. Welcome, Dr. Washington.
Thank you. Just to add a little bit to that, Michelle. So like many of you have been a longtime member of APS, joined in graduate school, met some of the lovely people on this call, including Dr. Pendergrass. And so we're going to talk a lot about this, but build your network, and APS is a fantastic place to start doing that. So after my undergrad was in biomedical engineering, and then of course I went to UAB for graduate work. I will be honest with you guys, I knew from probably high school that I wanted to be in industry. Met somebody in industry and knew all along. Went to grad school, and that was slowly, I won't say encouraged out of me, but the traditional path was put in front of me. And right around the time I got ready to finish, I started thinking about it, and I had a really, for those of you that know Dr. Kathleen Barasek, she said to me, you know what, go do a postdoc, figure it out in a postdoc. And so I went back to Vanderbilt, did my postdoc. I was there, the standard 3 years or so, and said, yeah, I still want to, we could talk a little bit more about it, but I still want to do industry. From there, I went to Kimberly and kind of joined their open innovation team. And I have been on the biotech med device part for the majority of my career, and now on the hospital side doing clinical trials. So all three parts. It's been fun. Thank you guys for having me.
Awesome. We look forward to hearing more, Dr. Washington. Dr. Kimberly Stein is a scientist with a background in exercise physiology and sports nutrition. She oversees programming and the translation of scientific information for influencers, as well as athlete and team testing at the Gatorade Sports Science Institute. Dr. Stein earned her doctorate at Purdue University in Indiana from the Department of Health and Kinesiology while training in the Interdepartmental Nutrition Program. Welcome, Dr. Stein.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you everyone for joining right before your holiday. Opposite of Valencia, I did not intend to be in industry. I had always wanted to be in academics. My heart was actually in the small college setting. I went to a small liberal arts school where I played basketball and softball. And when I went back for my PhD, I knew that I didn't want to be at a big R1 university. My heart was at this small school where I could do some research, I could teach, and I wanted to keep coaching. I was the assistant basketball coach while I was teaching and doing research and service and all of those things. It was crazy, but it was great fun. And then my current role just kind of fell into my lap. And I thought, wow, if I ever were to go to industry, the Gatorade Sports Science Institute is where I would want to be. It's a perfect marriage of my scientific and my athletic backgrounds. But I'll go for a couple of years and get this really cool industry experience. It will make me a better professor, be able to give more, guidance to my students. And I thought it would be just a short learning experience for me, and I'd go back. And that was 15 years ago. And I'm still in industry now. So you can tell that I like it. There's still a part of me. I'm an adjunct faculty at Purdue. I still love to get in the classroom. I do guest lectures and I teach some classes whenever my schedule allows. But I'm obviously loving industry, and it's been a really good fit for me. And I'm glad that I took that chance. And I don't intend to leave.
That's great. Thank you so much. Our final panelist is Dr. Carl Pendergrass. He earned a doctorate in physiology and pharmacology, specializing in basic science research in hypertension. Dr. Pendergrass completed his postdoctoral fellowship in the Division of Cardiology at Emory University in Atlanta and the Biomedical Engineering Department at the Georgia Institute of Technology. For his postdoctoral research, he elucidated mechanisms of myocardial healing and scar formation in ischemia reperfusion injury. Dr. Pendergrass is a regional medical scientific director at Merck. Welcome, Dr. Pendergrass.
Thank you all for having me. And it's amazing at how much overlap there is. Dr. Washington and I, we go all the way back to grad school, APS days with all of the different training sessions. And that gave us a chance to meet not only each other and other colleagues that have gone on to do amazing things with their careers, but also the presidents of APS and different faculty and different mentors. And we were able to learn a lot from that. And for a number of you athletes like Dr. Stein, I walked onto the football team at Wake Forest and then did that all 4 years and majored in health and exercise science because I wanted to be a medical doctor. When I got into a prep program, that's when I learned about the PhD, doing more research, and I went in reverse. I went from more of clinical all the way down through my career to finally molecular biology with my postdoc. So it's a wide range, and connections and opportunities led me to Merck because I was a UNCF Merck postdoctoral fellowship where once again, mentoring and networking set me up for the opportunity to shine in the interview and be hired. So thank you and look forward to seeing how I can help.
Thank you, Dr. Pendergrass. This is so great. It's so interesting to already hear about your backgrounds, even though I am familiar with you guys. So very exciting. Again, to those of you in the audience, welcome all. I know some of you may have already started your holiday break, so thanks for taking the time to join. So we'll get straight into the panelist discussion. So our first topic is going to be about pivoting to industry. But just a quick note, again, remember, please do put your questions in the Q&A, and I'll try to remind you guys throughout. But that way we can kind of help to make sure that we're answering what you guys have top of mind and kind of where you want to lead the discussion, okay? So our first question is going to, like I said, revolve around pivoting to industry. So when transitioning to industry, what were your initial steps to prepare and plan your career move? So we can start, Dr. Washington, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. So initial steps, I will be very honest and transparent. I don't think I had a game plan. I will say, the access to information, I won't date us, Carl, but the access to information was not as large, right? There was no go Google being a, senior research scientist. That wasn't necessarily a thing. I will say that my first steps, I called what I call my scientific village. So Carl's and the Clintorians, and I was like, this isn't it. There are so many things that I like about what I'm doing, but I want something else. And I was at a very unique part of my career. Vanderbilt gave me a faculty position offer, right? And so it's on the table. We are decades into this. I don't think my mother has forgiven me yet, but I knew I had to make a choice because I was doing a lot of teaching. I did not want to start the lab, or at that point it was taking over my boss's lab, who had become chair of medicine, and let these people down when I knew that wasn't where my heart was. So the first step, I would say, was self-reflection. And, I had friends that were saying, okay, what is it you want to do? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What are you doing right now that drives you in? And I had a part of my postdoctoral work was truly translational. It was interacting with patients. It was the clinical trial side of things. It was the upfront care. I had the fortunate event of being able to work with a physician who didn't have a PhD. So we balanced each other out. So that was my first step. What did I want to do? I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys that money didn't play into it, but it did. I looked at what I was offered, and I looked at the trajectory of people that I knew that had gone the industry route. And so I was very intentional on the jobs that I looked for and I applied for, because I was still a postdoc and I was still working 65 hours a week, like some of you may be. So I didn't want to go on this, some people have the approach of apply for everything. But I was starting to get people asking me for interviews, so I couldn't interview for everything. I needed to be able to function. So I looked for things that were broad, right? I didn't want to, as Michelle said, I had gone all the way down to hypoglycosylation. So not just the molecule, but how the molecule was impacted. At that point, I was doing experimental therapeutics. And so it was a little bit further up. I wanted to have an opportunity where if I needed to get down into the details of molecular biology, I could, but that I was really looking at how products or devices or pharmaceuticals interacted with the population, and then what we did back from that. So we had a message, a kind of a theme. I think I put it on a t-shirt, and it was bench to bedside and back. So it's kind of where the experience I wanted. And I looked at the jobs that were open and the things that were out there. And I jumped out on a limb. A sales rep walked into the lab one day, just trying to sell those purple nitrile Kimberly Clark gloves. And I asked him, I was like, who makes these? Like, who gives you guys these feedback? Wasn't necessarily trying to go into marketing or sales, but he said, you do know we've got corporate research and engineering. I'm sorry, what? Didn't know you did. I thought you just made gloves and diapers. So from just asking him that, he put me in touch with someone. I'm not even sure they had a job opportunity at that time, but the next thing I know, somebody was emailing me a job description. So, you'll hear the three of us say network, talk to people over and over again. But I will say that is how I prepared. And then I just went on site. I went in person. I walked the building, looked at the products, looked at where they were trying to grow the team, and decided I wanted a challenge. So starting close to home and what I was doing, what I didn't like, what I loved, and tried to find more of that.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Dr. Stein, do you want to talk a little bit about your initial steps?
Similarly, I don't think I did a good job pivoting. I didn't really plan it out very well. I didn't know what I was getting into. So, as I said earlier, I didn't plan to go into industry. I was very happy doing what I was doing. And I was in the Milwaukee area at Carroll University, and the Gatorade Sports Science Institute was located in Barrington, Illinois, which is about an hour drive away. And I thought, I know pharmaceutical companies will often give faculty an opportunity to come over their summers and learn new skills and maybe be involved with some research. And I thought maybe they'd allow me to come down to their lab similarly and do, a short time with them over the summer and learn some new skills and learn what they're doing. And so I went to the Gatorade Sports Science Institute website, and they had a little contact us area. So I wrote a note in there. I didn't know anybody there. And I just, I wrote that, is there a possibility that I could come? Here's my areas of interest. At the time I was doing research related to yogurt consumption for recovery from strength training and promoting muscle protein synthesis, et cetera. So I wrote it and then kind of forgot about it because, I thought, it's just, who knows where this message is going to go in this random website. And a couple months later, I got an email from Craig Horswell at the Gatorade Sports Science Institute saying, oh, this was a very interesting request we got. We'd love to talk to you about it. Here's a person you can contact. And I contacted them. And so we started talking about what this summer experience could be. And they had just released this job announcement that was like, it was written for me. Somebody with a PhD with a few years of experience who also had experience with athletes. And it was, I kind of couldn't believe it, right? So I thought, well, I'll apply and go through, and obviously I got the job. And I remember sitting, in my apartment thinking, what am I going to do? I wasn't expecting, I just wanted to do a little summer kind of experience. But now I got this really cool job opportunity. And as I said before, I decided to go ahead and take it thinking, it would be a good learning opportunity for me. I'd learn about science in the business world, and then I would go back. And that's what I was not prepared for, what science in the business world meant, how R&D interacts with the businesses. I thought R&D would rule the world, right? In terms of I was hired into an innovation role. See, look at these guys, my naivety, right? And I thought, I work for GSSI and we are going to direct all innovation. I'm going to come up with the next Gatorade product that's going to make someone jump higher and run faster. And this is, we are going to we're going to drive the direction of this company. And I quickly learned that that's not the way it is, that marketing has a huge role in it. We play a huge role, right? But it's just not exactly how I thought it would be and what the interactions would be. And I was very surprised when, somebody who doesn't know very much about sport nutrition or exercise physiology would come say, here's a concept we would like. How can you go make this happen? Instead of us going to them the other way around. So it was very eye-opening to me. And I also I would listen to earnings calls for the company. I had no idea what all these business acronyms meant. And I would keep a list of them. And then I'd ask people afterwards, what does this mean? And what does this mean? I had no business background at all. So I just asked a lot of questions, right? And I would take some webinars on business and just trying to learn kind of the basic functions. What is a marketing organization like? How does R&D fit into that? What do all these profit acronyms mean? The first time I heard the word deck, when somebody responded to a PowerPoint, I said, what in the world are they talking about? And I swore I would never call it a deck. And now, of course, I say the word 10 times a day. So I think, looking back, I should have prepared more, but I didn't know what I was getting into. And so if you find yourself in that situation, you just have to ask a lot of questions and be patient with yourself, right? And give yourself time to learn the things you don't know. And it's exciting. It should be exciting. If you're going into industry, it should be exciting to learn those things you don't know about the business side of things. my advice, I guess, if you're going into industry now in hindsight, is to maybe prepare a little bit about, ask some questions ahead of time of your network. My network was all academics because I didn't intend to go this route. But start to connect with people who are in industry and start to ask those questions to prepare yourself going in, because the business of science is a whole new animal than what you're used to in academics.
Thank you for that, Dr. Stein. That's very insightful, and I think a lot of people should take that to heart. A lot of good insight there. Dr. Pendergrass, what did you have in mind when transitioning to industry, or kind of what was that initial steps to prepare and plan your move?
And so when I started out, I originally was going into the post-bac program because I figured this will help me get into med school. Then I quickly learned med school isn't for me because that's not the way my mind processes information. This PhD route is. I can test things, and science was working because, as we all know, there's a lot of times you just know a project's going to work and it gives you nothing, and then you start to question everything. And so Alencia and I, we met at the different at experimental biology because we were travel award winners and APS winners and this winner. And so being in the mix of other people doing well and being successful, some of my friends and colleagues started calling me the golden boy of the lab. So I just knew I was going into academics. I was going to have my own lab. Then politics and relationships, I'll say, change the situation, change the outcome. When I first started in grad school, the NIH was well funded. People were happy to talk about the research. It was overflowing, connections across universities. It was very collegial. By the time I finished and started going into my postdoc years, the funding changed. Funding changed to the extent where labs that I knew and had 20 plus years of running were starting to shut down because funding was drying up. And when funding dries up, people get very closed off. So instead of people welcoming you to their poster, their presentation, and having these good, great scientific discussions, people say, why are you coming here? Few people even ask my mentor, why is your student talking to me about my research or know my research? And for me, that was a shock because I looked at this as a community. So that's when I first started to say, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. Then at the time, my girlfriend, who's now my wife, she's also a researcher. She's DVM. We were doing our postdocs together. She found her career in medical writing. And she said, this academic professor life isn't for us. And, looking at it, chasing grants, my writing wasn't my strongest suit. My science, hands down. My writing, it was a bit wishy-washy at that point in time. I've improved over the years, though. And so looking at it, okay, what else can I do where I can enjoy the science? So and I knew my grant was coming to an end in about a year. And so my postdoc mentor said, hey, my grant's not renewed yet. What are you going to do? You need to start looking for jobs. So about a year out. So that's the first tip I'm going to give everybody. Don't start searching when you're like 3 months out. Start searching a year to 2 years out from what you want to do, because it's going to take that time to build up your network, for people to know you. Because when people refer you, they're putting their thumb stamp of approval on you. You're a reflection of them, and you can take their reputation down because they'll look at that person. Why did you send that person to me? And outside of that perspective, there's also the perspective of you want someone to refer you that knows you. They're not going to send you into any environment. It could be a backstabbing environment. It could be a micromanaging environment. And if that doesn't mix with your style, you're not going to do well and thrive. So it's a twofold. When you're looking for someone to network with and refer you, you want them to get to know you as much as you get to know them and about their job opportunities. So I received the UNCF Merck Postdoctoral Fellowship. I stayed in contact with my Merck research mentor. And not only when I saw a job opportunity open up with Merck, after I had done informational interviews, not only for industry medical affairs, I also did it for um, government research, and I also did it for academic administration. Because guess what? I was still looking for a job after my grant ended. So I was on unemployment and doing the job search, sending out over 200 resumes and applications. So there's going to be times when you set yourself up to be as successful as possible, but then there's going to be not even really a stumbling block. That just gave me time to learn about the different ways that you submit resumes, CVs, and all the different formats. So now I'm able to pass that information on to others. So everything that changes and doesn't work according to your plan isn't a negative. And at that time, there were a number of us, of my friends that had PhDs, that had postdoc experience, that were in and out of jobs and on unemployment just because the way academia was going and the way the recession was going. So you want to continue to network. You want people to get to know you. You want to have informational interviews, and you want to do as much research as possible. And when you're looking at industry, everyone that has an iPhone, I can say this easily, pick up your iPhone and go to your stock app. Put in different companies that appear to have an interest, a scientific interest that you have, and start following them so you can get updates. That's a way, like Stein just said, all the different acronyms, you start to see those acronyms. You start to see their business calls. You start to find out what all that MBA jargon is that we don't know about. And there's going to be other transferable skills that we'll talk about later. But those are just some of the tips that you start to learn and implement. So that way you can set yourself up.
Thanks for sharing that. That's it's really important, I think, to highlight that, it's not all roses and sunny skies. So thank you very much for sharing that, Dr. Pendergrass. Now we'll kind of move on, because I think you guys did a really great job about talking about your major considerations within that, within your answers there. So we'll move on to career planning. So I'll start this one with Dr. Stein. What is your experience with career planning, and how has it helped you in your professional journey?
My approach to career planning has changed a lot over the years. When I got into industry, again, being very naive about the differences, I still had kind of the academic approach where you take a job in academics and you're going, in most cases, after tenure, and you are pretty much going to stay, right? You want to advance still in your role, but your role is pretty defined, right? And you're gonna do research in your area and build this great career around that. When you get to industry, one of the first questions is, okay, let's develop your career plan. And where do you want to be in 3 years? What part of the company do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? And how are we going to get you there? And I said, what do you mean? I came here to work for the Gatorade Sports Science Institute. I don't, and I wasn't thinking about how I was part of PepsiCo, this big, huge global organization. Again, like I went in so narrow focused blinders on. And, they want you to grow within the company. They want you to experience all these different parts of the company. They ideally, you go work on Quaker oatmeal and you go work on Tropicana juice, and you do all of these different things and you get experiences, and that's how you continue to grow and expand. And that was really difficult for me, because I didn't want to work on those different things. I wanted to do the job I came for, right? And do well and obviously grow in that area. So it was a real eye opener for me. And whenever I bring in a new employee to work with me that doesn't have industry experience, it's one of the first things we talk about, is kind of how a career path looks different in industry than it does in academia. And breadth of knowledge is in many cases very much valued versus depth of knowledge. That, that's a case by case basis, of course, depending on the job. But so for me, I had, I started thinking about, kind of open your mind, and I had to decide how important promotions and climbing the ladder were to me versus the actual area I wanted to work in. And so, when I was younger and not married and didn't have kids, I did everything I needed to do. I put myself on that career path to growing and expanding and getting all these experiences, whether it wasn't necessarily going to work in a different area company, but I went on a sales ride in New Orleans and spent 2 days with the sales team going in and out of grocery stores, learning about how products are placed and what end cap space meant. And, a whole science of their own, right? That I knew nothing about. And then they would ask me, well, why is this product formulated this way? And then we'd have that science conversation, like, oh, well, that would really help us when we're trying to get this end cap space, if we could better talk about the benefits of this product. And so, that led to some career growth in terms of bringing in my education background. And I was able to say, I'm an educator at heart. I see this need here to better, make sure the people who are on the front lines and selling in our products really understand the science behind the products. And so moved my career in that direction. And then when I got older and I started a family, there were, again, decisions to be made. And I personally chose that I wanted to stay working with athletes and in sport nutrition. And I didn't want to travel as much anymore at that point. I mean, when I first started, I was traveling all over the place and it was great fun, but I didn't want to, I just didn't want the life of a mom on the road all the time. That was my personal decision. There's nothing wrong with moms that are on the road. I don't want to imply that at all, but that was my decision that I wanted to be home more. And everybody has to make that personal decision for themselves, moms and dads, right? When you start a family, and you have to sit down and you have to think about that in the light of your career. How are we going to make this all work? And everyone's decision is very personal, and you have to figure out what works for you. So I decided I didn't want to travel as much. And I also made the decision at that time that I really wanted to stay in the Gatorade Sports Science Institute. I was no longer interested in climbing the PepsiCo career chain. It was important to me to keep working in the area I wanted to work on. And so I made that decision. And then I worked with my managers to set my objectives and set my career path accordingly. So it's really important that you take those steps for you as an individual, you with your family, to decide where you want your career to go. It's important that you're really honest with your managers as you're setting up your career plan, that you're going in the direction that you want it to go. And I think one of the great things about industry is there's so many different opportunities that if you're interested in tweaking your career path, like let's say you're interested in sales and you want to be able to be connected more with them, even though that's not your background, that opportunity is there, right? If you want to do more, I didn't do this, but I could have done more in food chemistry and actually making the products. My master's degree is in chemistry. I could have gone that route. Those opportunities are there. You just have to be willing to vocalize that with your managers and set your career path in that direction.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's so important to also think about, family, work-life balance, those types of things, and in that career planning kind of journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks. Dr. Washington, what about your experience with career planning, and what does career planning look like for you?
Sure. So I know they are popular now. They were not as popular when I was in grad school, which are your IDPs, right? So your individual development plan. Thankfully, when I got to my postdoc, Vanderbilt had a version for postdocs and residents. So we went through the training on how to create, your IDP. It was pages long. And so it takes a while, you work on it on Saturday over a cup of coffee to try to lay out what you want to do. There are so many available online that are a little bit more streamlined. So when I first got to Kimberly Clark, they had a version of it, which was a lot more compressed. So I I kind of knew how to do that piece, but like Kimberly, I was like, wait, what do you mean? What's my career movement trajectory? I think was the term they wanted to use. And that was like day 2. So learned that. What I also learned how to do was a needs gap assessment, right? So if I am looking at these types of spaces or these types of roles, what do I know now? What experience do I have now? What's needed for that position? And I would write it down on a piece of paper. And then I had a great manager at that time that I could sit with and say, hey, in order to get here, I need this experience. How do we create my work objectives or my performance objectives, as most people call them? How do we align my performance objectives so that they match my developmental objectives, right? So the other piece that I want to tell people is know the organization you're going in, especially if you're going into a technical role. You need to know what the model is like. And so what I mean by model is, for example, I was in one that was an H model. So on any given R&D team, you had a manager that had gone gone up the management track, but typically they had a technical background, and then you had a technical leader. And this was someone who was, came in as a scientist of whatever nature and grew up through technical fellowship and really wanted to stay only on the technical side. So they would manage the portfolio while you had a people manager managing the people. And then you had people that kind of lived in the H. And so they would cross back and forth in the cross of the H. So you need to go in and ask the questions, okay, what type of organization is this, right? So, I've got a PhD in chemical engineering. How do I actually eventually get onto the customer insights team? Like, is that actually a doable path? And then, be flexible. It's about what you're good at. Where I am now, so I'm in the hospital setting, right? So everybody knows what we've been dealing with for the past few years. And so things are always hectic. We have just going into the next fiscal year, we've just re-implemented performance objectives for our team. We relaxed a lot of those. You got patients in the hallway. Nobody really has a desire or time to talk about, I'm going to go to that conference. It just wasn't a reality for us over the past few years. But we also do developmental goals. And my past boss, he did his a little bit differently, and I have adopted it for myself. It's just an Excel sheet. It's called 2x2 goals. You can create it for yourself. In one column, you have tasks 1 through 4. The next one, you have estimated completion date. And then you have 2 big goals in the next one. So if your big goal is to go from technical leadership or technical roles into people management, then you sit with someone who's in people management and say, okay, how did you get there, right? So eventually you need to lead a project. Eventually you need to, get some webinars, Center for Creative Leadership, get some training. Eventually you need to know a lot about the business. So you may need to do some of those sales trips. You need to know a little bit more about what happens outside of the laboratory if you're going to be the people manager, because that's the person who goes and does the budget, gets the funding, does all of those things. So that 2x2 format, after decades of writing IDPs, I think I found the one that works for me because it's simple. It's 2 goals that I'm going to work on in 2 years. It's biting it down, and I still have in the back of my mind what I want to do in 5, what I want to do in 10. That's laid out somewhere. But I can look at this one little Excel file sheet and go, okay, these are the 4 tasks I got to do to get to goal 1. And then check off where I, completed it. And goal 2, and give myself 2 years, give myself some grace to just tackle those 2 things.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. That's really helpful. If there is, do you have like a link to like a template for that? If you could throw that in the chat, that would be really awesome. Otherwise,
I'll try. So what I will do, because I'm actually looking at it's very empty, I'm going to take a screenshot and it's just an Excel sheet, and I'll put the picture of it in the in the chat.
Perfect. That's awesome, because that is really helpful. And I really liked what you also said about identifying your kind of needs or your gaps in yourself and planning. Dr. Pendergrass, what about you? What does this career planning look like for you, and how has it kind of progressed over time?
So I'll try and hit on themes because I think my other two panelists hit very strongly on some of the specifics. So first off, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. uh, and it's interesting because after joining the company and being in medical affairs and you get exposed to it in grad school, another alumni would come give a career talk, but it was so esoteric. But what's amazing is it's not the end all be all. With industry, you have seen so many times after you get in that there's some jobs, it's like, that's a job title? Just like Dr. Stein said, that's a job? Wait a minute, I didn't know that was, the way that SOP or the job announcement was written up. It's like, I had no idea. And that's exactly what I dreamed about. And in some cases, people with a PhD background, because I have a cousin who earned her PhD in cancer biology from Chapel Hill, who became a VP um, at one of the appliance companies for their like internet connection innovations. So there's so many different opportunities after you get in and you start learning about different jobs. And sometimes you see jobs posted, other times you just hear people are hired and they're starting a new position. And when you start asking about that position, it gets your gears churning. And a lot of that comes from some people setting up the IDP that Dr. Washington was just elaborating on. And so some people are able to say, hey, I can meet this because I've done this, this, and this. And in addition to the IDP, something else that you'll need to learn about and understand how to put together is your year-end review. In industry, there everybody's evaluated, and you have to know not only what to put in there, but how to write it up. And this is a way that you can get put into some companies' succession plans for when they do see somebody's about to retire in a position. Well, who do we have that we know has the capabilities or we believe has the potential? And so hitting on those themes, you really want to try and put yourself in the best position. In some cases, that's what shadowing. I had one young mentee who came out of Emory. He didn't want to do any type of postdocs. He wound up landing a full-time job at the bench with a pharmaceutical company, but he always wanted to go in medical affairs. And once you get into a company, it's a lot easier to know when job opportunities are opening up, and it's a good opportunity to do what they call shadowing. And so this, once again, lets you know what other people's jobs are and how you could potentially be successful or marry your past experiences, like Dr. Stein said, when she went on that sales visit. She was able to hear what they needed, and then you're able to put together for the company a proposal to say, this is a missing point. This is the gap assessment that Dr. Washington was alluding to. This is missing. I can feel it, and I can feel it successfully, and this is what I project the outcomes to be. So when you start thinking in that mindset, as opposed to an academic mindset of, oh, here's a question, and I just want to answer that question, that's when you're starting to get in the right frame of thought, not only for your own career progression, but then other people taking notice and helping you in your career progression. Because I've learned the difference between a manager, a mentor, and then after I got into industry a couple of years later, I learned about a sponsor. So the manager, that's the person that you report to. They want you to do well because when they do well, they do well. A mentor, that's somebody that's going to look out for you and say, hey, this is a way to build yourself up. This is something that I stumbled across when I was going through that process. Here's the tips. Sponsor, see, a sponsor is really important. The sponsor is the person that has a seat at that table when you're not in the room and can talk highly about you to say, this person could do it. This person could be successful. So though I know that's a lot of different information, but I am trying to tie it back into what Dr. Stein and Dr. Washington has already put forward. So that way you can have it in a way that you can grasp it and really start to run with it. Because this is information that we didn't even come close to knowing about when we were in grad school. It wasn't even discussed in postdoc. And then when you get into your first position, that's when it starts to say, oh, this is the first time I'm hearing about this. So now hopefully this is a theme that you can see how you can start putting together, especially in grad school, in your postdoc, where you can find different opportunities within companies to branch out while you're still in school.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Very helpful information. Thank you, Dr. Pendergrass. We'll do one more kind of quick question for the panelists on networking tactics. Then we'll kind of do a few Q&A, and then we'll go to a poll. So the next question I have for you guys, how do you properly leverage mentors in professional societies? I know you guys kind of briefly touched on each of these things, but what does networking outreach look like on social media versus in person versus maybe email or cold call like we used to do? We could start, Dr. Washington, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So I forgot to say this earlier. When I was applying for my first industry job, they asked me to come and do a career talk. And I went, wait, what? You know, I was prepared for a chalk talk. I was prepared to discuss research. And I picked up the phone and called the APS office and was like, they are asking me for this. What do I do? Within maybe 3 hours, they had several APS members in industry contacting me to tell me how to get through that. So you, as a member of APS or whatever society is your home society, you've already got, you know, people that are vested in you succeeding. And if you don't know how to find the webinar, you know, and we're going to talk about the websites and how to get there, pick up the phone and call the office. Somebody will, they want to help you, they'll call you back. As far as networking tactics in the age of social media, of course, as all of you know, LinkedIn is, you know, where people go. But there are a lot of Facebook groups that either request that we add to. I mean, there's one that's like women in clinical research. There are all types of things. And of course, those aren't structured. You can ask whatever you want. The thing I will say about LinkedIn, because every time I do a panel, I know, you know, my LinkedIn is going to blow up over the next 24 hours, and I do not mind. All of you, send me a LinkedIn request, but please remember it's the holidays and grant me some grace. If you are going to reach out to someone, and I think Dr. Pendergrass touched on this before, if you are being introduced by someone, that's usually a little bit easier route because that person who I know, if I see Dr. Adesina, send me something, I know her, I've known her for 10 years, I'm going to look at it. That's always a great route. However, and it was said earlier, don't let someone play their trump card for you and you burn it, right? So if you get an introduction, then you need to follow up immediately and say, oh, Dr. Stein, I'm so glad that Dr. Pendergrass introduced us. I know it's the holidays and you're with your family. Do you have a better time that we can touch base? And grant her the grace to be with her family and follow up a little bit later. And she's going to either say, hey, you know what? I don't really have any time for any new mentees, but I can answer a couple of questions and maybe connect you with someone. Or she's going to say, yeah, let's, you know, get a virtual cup of coffee and, you know, talk about what you need. So when you're reaching out to someone, especially if you're cold calling, be very clear on what you need from them. Right. So in that first message, it would say, Dr. Stein, I saw you on the APS panel. I am, you know, really looking to transition. I am in sports medicine right now. I really want to know if I need to do an academic postdoc first, or if I be very specific, because she's got 45 seconds that she's reading that. And either she's going to answer your question right then or say, hey, you know, let's go a little bit deeper. I may be able to help you. If you cold message someone on LinkedIn and it takes them weeks, it's not because they are completely ignoring you. It is just because they, you know, 9 times out of 10, especially if you're going towards an executive, they are busy. I had a great example. I actually had an ex-boyfriend reach out. I hadn't talked to this person in about 5 or 10 years. And he was reaching out for a friend of his son's to say, hey, she is, finishing up her grad work. I think she is bright. He is also an executive, not in science. And I just really wanted to know if you could talk to her. And it took a lot, I'm sure, for him to reach out to me. And so I immediately said, absolutely, I will reach out to you. Here is my admin's contact information. Please give her a call and have her put you on my calendar. The person did not actually call my admin. And so the next week I'm going, wait, there was a student. And I, because I have blocked off mentee time and I really need to touch base. And my admin goes, I never heard from her. My admin then reaches out to her and she doesn't reply. 2 months later, she comes back and says, hey, can we grab a coffee? Now, I'm sure several of you are on the call going, wait, what? Why would you ever do that? And she dropped down to the bottom of my list. I keep no more than 5 mentees at one time because I like to give people the best of me. But if you have just a question on, hey, does this job description, can you help me figure this out? Either I will or I'll pass it off to the Carls in my life or the people that I know can help you, but you have to be responsive. Instagram and Facebook, if you happen to see any of us on there, that's play for us, right? So if you go into DMs on a very social site, you probably won't get a response. Majority of us have LinkedIn accounts or a professional Twitter account that would get you, a much faster response. You're going to kind of filter yourself into the junk. So that's, networking on social media in the 2020s. If you do get someone's email address, remember that most of our organizations that are big have junk filters. So if you are emailing us from hot chocolate, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it probably will never get to our email account. I recommend you use your professional email address. Of course, you might not want to use your school account, but first name, last name @gmail.com always makes it through. And then if you're going to reach out to someone at work, be very specific. I would say, I've had people reach out and say, hey, Lindsay, I saw you on this panel. I applied to a job at Wellstar. I haven't heard anything back. Do you think that I'm a fit? I've also attached my CV. That is such a clear email to me. And in this hiring market, I always stop and go, hey, who is the hiring manager? Let me look at this person. Then the next thing, as Carl mentioned, let me call somebody at this university, or let me see, who this person is. Maybe I can give them a little bump up. And then I'll reach out to the hiring manager and say, hey, somehow this person may not have made it through the algorithm to get to you, but hey, take a look at this CV. Now, I've done that several times and often forgotten to reply to the applicant. And the next thing you know, they just get an interview. So again, remember that people are swamped. Be very intentional with your cold emails or your cold call. You might get some people to respond. That's not me. If you do find my telephone number, you're better off with a cold email. But give very clear information. And if you just don't know, it's okay to say, hey, this panel was great. I think I'm interested in sports medicine. I think I'm interested in pharmacology. I don't know what to do next. You might get a response that says, hey, go watch this webinar, call me back. Or, hey, let me introduce you to Dr. Williams. Or, hey, this. So go ahead and ask. Don't be afraid. You might just find a sweet spot.
That's really helpful. Yeah, and I think it's really great points. We're all just people, everyone's trying to balance everything. So I really like what you said about just giving some grace, and we're trying to help you out as much as the people, we've all been helped to our positions. And Dr. Pendergrass,
with the way you phrase that, and just, how every job isn't for every person, every mentor isn't for every mentee, yeah. Right? And so someone responds short or rude, or they are just people, and that just may not be your person to add to your networking village. It's always okay to, somebody might be a great mentor for Carl that just doesn't fit with my style. So it's always okay to just say, well, I thank you for your time. If you see any opportunities, please, remember me and feel free to send them my way. And then you can leave the relationship at that.
Yeah, that's an excellent point as well. Anything to add, Dr. Pendergrass?
Sure. So first off, Dr. Washington put it down. We're from the same camp. And I just want to reiterate and emphasize because they've already started coming in. So first off, congratulations on the people that found us on LinkedIn and started sending the LinkedIn connects. One catch, because I haven't looked at any of them yet. The number one thing I say, and we'll take it back to Friday, the movie Friday, never, ever, 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 ever send a blank generic LinkedIn connect. Put something in there. Dr. Washington listed it out perfectly. Let us know, because guess what? If it's just a blank one, it could have been somebody accidentally hit the wrong button. And now that's energy, that's time, and we're chasing. If we know, even if we're not the best person, we have a network. That's one of my specialties, is networking. And if it's not me, if I'm not the best person, then I might know somebody who is. And then it's on you to be responsive, because once again, even going through that process, we're looking out for each other and we're looking out for the next generation. Because one of the people I looked up to in grad school, who's now faculty at a school of medicine, she reached out to me for one student, and I replied because it was her. Never heard back from the student. And so a few months later, I checked. I said, "Hey, what about this? You know what? I don't know." But hopefully that doesn't hurt any chances of me sending the next student to you. I said, "No, of course not, because I know it's you." So with the friends and the networks that we have, that is one way. But when you're having someone vouch for you, you have to do everything on your end to make sure that continues. And so the next student she sent to me, this is my type of student. Even outside of his main day job, with him going to work on his master's, he was responsive when it was appropriate. And so we stayed in contact. And every so often, I'll just send him a message just to check on him, because I know he has a dangerous day job. And he's helping to protect other people. So once you build up that rapport with the new mentor and with the new person, then there's going to be leeway, because not only leeway for you, but then there's also the leeway for us. Because I know Dr. Washington and I are from that group of, y'all heard us say, yes, she was putting in 65 hours as postdoc. We would grind. My thesis mentor and I used to have races to see who could find the new paper first. So that's putting in a lot of work over the weekends. Forget just the, coming into the lab, but when we would come back in, we would even send each other emails, 11:30 at night. Hey, this paper just came out. So we're still learning how to be successful at downtime. So thank you for taking that amount of time and being clear and straightforward with us. And even if you don't know, just put that in there. I'm still in this process of trying to figure out. Because some of us have been in that process, some of us stay in that process. We can help mentor through that in some cases. Now, in addition, because I'm someone that's not on Facebook, I'm not on Instagram, I'm on LinkedIn because one of my professional career mentors had said, this is the way you have to do it to reach that next level. So I don't check my LinkedIn that often. So that's another component you have to take into account. But when I reach out to you, then I will give you a means of getting in better contact with me, where I will be more responsive. But it's also once again, we are learning how to balance not only our personal lives with family and our work lives, and then our own career in mentoring, because we are still in the process of being mentored too, along with our professional development. And so thank you all for handling that. And when there's opportunities to meet in person, Walking around, that's when I've gotten a chance to see a lot of people. Going to a conference, finding out a presentation, just making sure. And for industry, we know it's not the same way. So here are 2 tips for networking and job search. The first tip, find out which conferences in your disease area that the company that you have of interest covers, and go to their medical information booth. If the company has a booth and a setup there for, sales and marketing, then they probably also have medical information. And so that's different ways you can get in contact with new people at that company. So that way you can have additional contacts and get additional perspectives on jobs. It might be that you like the job that you're talking to the person right then. And then the second point, go to the company's HR website. When you're on the company's HR website, they list internships. So they may list the postdoc opportunities. So you want to find as many different ways to get connected with that job as possible. Put in an alert. So if you've already gone to the stock app on your iPhone and found one on your Android phone, now you also want to put an alert in on your human resources page at each company. Look for those internships when they come available. Look for those jobs, those entry-level jobs at the bench or wherever. And I saw one question, and since I'm hitting on this point, find the way that works with you best. If you're better off working with animals, work with animals, because in most cases there is a preclinical. If you're better off working with people and you're able to get in a translational or clinical, then get in that type of lab. Whichever way you can be successful and shine the brightest and learn information and grow, go that route. So never send a blank LinkedIn connect. When you're at a conference, go to as many different areas for the company as possible and make introductions. And then also go to the HR website. So those are just a few different ways from someone that's not social media savvy on networking.
Thanks. That's very practical. Thank you for that. Dr. Stein, I know you're really great on social media applications. So do you have any other tips that weren't covered that come to mind?
Oh, I think my panelists really, the 2 other panelists really covered this. I mean, wholeheartedly, do not send a blank LinkedIn. I mean, I just can't reiterate that enough. When you get so many of them, the ones that are going to stick out are the ones that people have a specific reason for wanting to connect with you, instead of just like, hey, I want to be connected in case someday down the road, maybe I need something from you. It's not the best practice. You've got to make yourself shine, and you need to be respectful of the person that you're reaching out to. So wholeheartedly. And then also, like Dr. Pendergrass just said, one of the things I was going to add is that it's easy to hide behind social media sometimes, and it's easy to just send a LinkedIn request, but networking takes some work. And now that we're back in person to conferences, go to the conferences and talk to people. My favorite thing to do is be at the booth. When we're at our scientific conferences, I love spending some time at the booth, and inevitably students come by and just have questions. And it's just real time, even if it doesn't become a long-term relationship. You can just give real-time advice and point them in the right direction. And it's a great opportunity to make connections or just get pointed in the right direction. So don't be afraid to, talk to people. It's not just all about social media, although I know that it's such an important part these days. And then just the last point I would make, because I know there's lots of other questions to get to, is that once you're in a company, you need to network within that company as well, right? There's, depending on the size of the company, of course, like my company is enormous and it's global, and there's so many functions. Like, I'm fascinated by the design function of our company. I have no background in it. I know, but I'm fascinated by it. And so I follow the leads of that group on LinkedIn, right? I want to know what's going on with them whenever I get a chance, and it's not very often, in a meeting or something that I run into those people. I try to connect with them and network. So it doesn't stop when you get in a company. There's a lot of internal networking and that's going to be important for your career growth going back to our last question as well. So I'll stop there because I think we've drained this really well to move on to the next questions.
Yeah, that's super, super helpful.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
One thing, when you go to conferences and you go to the booth, 9 times out of 10, you're talking to marketing and sales, maybe. But ask them, hey, is there anybody from R&D here at the conference? They will immediately go, yes, let me text her. And maybe set up a time for you to come back if that's what you're looking for. Everybody's trying to help with the recruiting. And the other thing, don't forget, LinkedIn has jobs. So if you go to Dr. Stein's LinkedIn, you'll see her company. When you click on the company, the open jobs should post up. And then also, people do repost jobs at their organization. So those are some practical things. If you're not getting what you feel like you need at the booth, ask them if there's someone there from R&D or from clinical trials or medical affairs. Ask them if who else is there from the company. They'll 9 times out of 10, we're all eating dinner together anyway. They'll text them and let them know that you're there at the booth.
Good points.
Yeah, really great point.
And there's one other thing I want to add on to that, as well as Dr. Stein's point about networking within the company. When you get hired, that is another important part of your career, is going to the different dinners, like Dr. Washington said, getting to know the coworkers, especially in other divisions and within your own division, because not only is there an opportunity for your development when people say, oh, I like this person, we connect very well. You know what? Maybe I'll invite them onto the team when I have this project going on. When they see you can work well and you're productive, they're going to get you on their team. They're going to invite you onto different opportunities because you're going to make them look good. And so, once again, networking is not a one and done, oh, I'm in the company, that's it. No, this is a continual process, and you should always work to make yourself better at it and to enrich your network, not expand your network, enrich your network.
Yeah, that's really important. All really awesome tips. Thank you to our panelists. So we'll go to a couple questions from the Q&A. Thank you so much for the awesome questions in here. I'm going to try to answer those that we haven't already answered or raise them up to the panelists at least. I think this is a really great topic. Is publish or perish still prominent in industry? Who on the panelists would like to answer that?
I'll take a stab at it. So I'm going to say it depends on the role. And so companies are getting a lot better in the job description on what they're looking for. So if you are coming in straight from academia and you are applying to just a staff scientist role, look at what the education requirement are. So if the preferred education is a doctorate of some level, they expect you to have a publication. As far as publishing when you are there, if you are on an upfront innovation or a technical exploration team, there may not be a lot of opportunity to publish things that are going to market or are going to move towards a product. And that's just from intellectual property standpoint, so intellectual assets. However, if you are working on a project that is expanding a portfolio, if you've got a business unit that you're supporting that they're trying to grow in that area, it actually helps the company to publish in that area. So some of the things that you are working on, whether there are, preclinical or bench work, or maybe it even is a comparative analysis, you may be expected to or asked to publish in that arena. It is very rare that your bonuses or your promotion or your merit increases are tied to publications in industry. That's really just not a thing. Those are all extra bonus points. But you may be asked to partner with a clinician who is a KOL, alphabet soup, key opinion leader in the field to get a publication on the use of one of your devices in the field. And so there are opportunities to do those things, but not necessarily required. However, when you are applying, especially if you're applying for a senior role, in industry, or if you're applying for a scientific affairs type role in a hospital system, they will expect you to have those publications because they want to know that you can think. That's number one. You can think, you can solve a problem, and you can put those problems on paper and communicate them out. Also, I know it's not publications, but oral presentations are huge in industry. So if you can highlight those, you will be the person that the marketing drags to the conference when they know they're presenting to a room full of physicians. If they don't have medical liaisons that can go, you will be that person. So highlighting your oral presentations at societies are huge, and continuing that after you get the job. I hope that was clear, Michelle.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think that's really great answer. Thank you for all that. I'll post this up for you guys too and see who'd like to take it. I think this is a really important question, and I think there's always lots of misconceptions about this. So would you say that a work or life balance is more attainable in industry compared to academia? So.
Dr. Stein, you go on first.
Well, it depends, right? I mean, that's the answer to a lot of things. I live in a college town. The majority of my friends are faculty. We all, have kids the same age. And there are times when they're jealous of me because I have a little bit more set work hours, or I'm able to just shift my work hours based on what I need. I very rarely work a weekend at this point in my life. I did in the past. At this point, I'm better at putting up the boundaries. They work almost every weekend because they've got grant submission deadlines, right? And they have things that they need to do. So I'll take their kids somewhere. But then there's times I have to travel places more than they might have to. So it really does depend. It depends on where you're at in your academic career. Are you still working on tenure, or have you already gotten tenure? And that changes the game quite a bit. Depends on the length of your academic contract, depends on what your grants are like. So I find it easier to set boundaries on my time in industry than I did when I was in academia. But at the same time, I also see friends in academia that are post-tenured that have a lot of flexibility as well. So it just really depends, and it depends on what level you're at. Dr. Pendergrass, I'll pass that on to you.
Sure. So the one thing I'll add to that is it depends on you too. It depends on what type of grind you have, because if you're one of those people of, ooh, I can't put this down, or you're in a job where I can't put this down and you're not setting up those boundaries, oh yeah, your work-life balance will be exactly what we've described that most people are used to seeing in academia. But if you're somebody that knows how to put up the boundaries or wants to put up the boundaries, or you're not that type of grinder, because I know I have some friends where if I don't hear from them for about 2 months, oh, they're on their grind. It doesn't matter what their job is. It's just, I know, oh, okay, yeah, they're getting that work in right now. But when they come up for air, I know we'll catch up. And there's other people that I've worked with. Yeah, I know not to try and call them after 3 o'clock on a Friday. So as all of what Dr. Stein said about your location, where you are in your life, and who you're working for, is also about you and what you expect out of yourself or what you're comfortable with yourself.
You need to know the company, right? So when you're interviewing, I recommend that people ask about the culture of the company when you're interviewing. So, and the way you phrase that is, what does a successful week look like here? How often does the team travel? How often, are we expected to respond to, emails, texts, phone calls? What does that look like? And if you're worried about them thinking you're lazy or something, you can frame it and say, hey, I want to make sure I'm not communicating with people when, they don't expect to be. So, when can I stop emailing people, or when do I stop texting people? And that's a great way to figure out what the culture is like there. I am surrounded by physicians. So my phone starts at 7 a.m., right? And it can go to 7 p.m. But you have to you have to figure out what is norm and then what it is what you want to do. And people quickly learn to respect your boundaries, but also give yourself some grace because it's going to fluctuate, right? Sometimes it's summertime. I've got all the time in the world. Monday through Fridays, when I've got a 16-year-old and a 3-year-old, everybody's trying to get to school. You can get me, but when dinner's ready, that's my cutoff time. So know the company, ask the questions during the interview.
And that also links back to what we said earlier. When you have somebody referring you and someone that knows you, they can also start setting you up with understanding what the company culture is. Because I know some of the people I've worked with over the years, I've told them how to phrase their questions because, hey, guess what? One company is very conservative. And if you start going in and talking about this is your time or this is what you're looking for salary, they may say, you know what, that's outside of our range and we'll go on to the next applicant. But then there's other companies that say, hey, if you don't come in negotiating, if you don't come in talking about some of these points, then we start to wonder, maybe that's not the person for us. So you have multiple routes to find out what that culture is, because that is very important, not only for the whole company, but you can find out for that department and you can find out for that team that you will be working on, because all three of them could be in a line or they could be out of order.
Yeah, thanks for that. Very important. I couldn't agree more. There's lots of subcultures and things like that in industry. So thank you all for that. What we'll do next is we'll actually put up a poll and we'll see what topic you all would like to cover for the last couple 15 minutes here. Thanks so much for the great discussion. So please go ahead and select your preferred topic that we'll cover for the next 15 minutes. So if you are in the audience, if you could please select. And Jake will let us know. Oh, awesome. Okay, so it looks like personal branding and pitching yourself to industry. Woo! All right. So I'll go ahead and we can start off with Dr. Stein this time, or Dr. Pendergrass, you want to go? Okay, awesome. We'll start you off with personal branding, and you have already touched a little bit on this, so we're excited to hear more.
So with personal branding is interesting. Because of my personality, there was a certain component that I would exude to an extent, but I also didn't know how to use it. I didn't know how to sharpen it. Then when I started working this job, we had different vice presidents over the department that started bringing us in more, not only on understanding other people, but also understanding yourself and how to interact, because we were the face of the company, and then also how to handle leadership. So this is a plug that I put out to all of the people I help mentor, because this was a bonus to me and helped me. We did Strength Finders 2.0. And Strength Finders 2.0, you're mainly buying the book to take the virtual test. And after you get the results back from the virtual test, yes, I know a lot of people say, well, I've done Myers-Briggs before, and I already know what I am. Okay, to an extent, you're right. But now you're actually putting it into an deficit of what I find for the majority, not everyone, but for the majority of people that say, I'm a master's, I'm a PhD, I'm academic, and I'm trying to go over the industry, because so many people use the wrong transferable skills. They say, oh, I can write well, I'm a good communicator. Guess what? So is everybody in this job, everybody that's applying. So, and the problem that most industry, HR people and then the hiring managers have is that there's no way most of the PhDs don't come in with a way of really advocating for themselves. They don't know, and that's how we come back to this. They don't know their own personal brand. And you don't know your strengths that are outside of the generic strengths of earning a PhD, which are more actions. and they also don't know how to present how that strength was used to identify a problem, solve a problem, and report the outcomes of the problem. And so I can give you an example. And this is one that I learned from Strength Finders that I didn't know about. And it took me about 2 years to gain an understanding. And now I still continue to work on it a couple of years later, so that way I can use it at will. It was woo. I'm like, woo. Okay, what's woo? WOO. Winning over others. Okay, what does that really mean? Because I've done sales before. I sold Cutco knives and I only sold one. That's when I learned I'm not a salesperson. I could give you the information. But winning over others is you have this ability, and part of it's in leadership. It showed up in the Myers-Briggs and different things, but you're able to get people to see a viewpoint and possibly agree to it and support it. And so it's like, okay. And that took me 2 years to figure out what that really meant. Then it took me another year or two to figure out, oh, this is how I've used it in my job. Oh, okay. This is how I can get people to go along with the idea, because I had these ideas. But now I'm trying to get the right people to go along and co-sign on it. And so most people that I come across with a PhD, they'll say, oh, I have leadership skills because I've led a lab, or I could do this. Mm-mm. Once again, that's a generic term. You're not showing what your true strength is and how it's been applicable to where the company will say, hey, that person could do this over here for us and make us successful. Because Dr. Stein made a statement earlier, growing within the company, they want to make sure the company is strong altogether. So I'll just start off on that and let the rest of my panelists jump in.
So I think that was covered really well. I think, personal branding, if you're currently in academia, what does that look like, right? So your personal branding is happening at your societies, at your conferences, right? Where you're interacting with your colleagues and the people that are there trying to sell things. The other part is what boards you sit on. If you can interact with your university's web page, getting those things that you've done highlighted on those news pages so that they're circulated by societies. The more people see your name pop up in things. And then also when I think I've got like 48 right now. When I go to look at all of these LinkedIn invites, what am I going to see when I pull your LinkedIn page up? What do you want me to see? Have those things highlighted on that page. And then the last is pitching your skill set. Remember, if you land an in-person or virtual interview, you just made it through the algorithm. You made it through the talent acquisition person who probably can't even pronounce all the words in the job description, doesn't even really know what they mean. You made it through them. You made it through the hiring manager's first screen. And I tell people all the time, you've got 30 seconds on that CV or resume to make that hiring manager go, yep, schedule the interview, or yep, pass them on to get a phone screen. 30 seconds. So that top block on your resume needs to make sense. Nobody reads your CV or your resume in the order in which you write it. So you need to make sure that it is clean and it is clear cut. They're going to look at where you got your degree. They're going to hop over to where you are right now. They're going to look at the time and when you used it. So be very clear and concise. If you make it to a phone screen, either by a recruiter or by the hiring manager, give yourself a cookie, because you just made it past, thousands of candidates to get to that point. Think about who you're talking to, right? So if you're talking about to the recruiter, stick with things that are on the job description, because they don't know a lot about it. Stick to the things that are on the job description, and also personality, to make sure you fit the company. Once you make it to the hiring manager, that is when you want to highlight those things that set you apart from the other people in your lab, right? So I love to hear, some of our most successful candidates say, I mentored, 5 high school students. Every time there is an MD that needs to learn a certain things, I'm the one that explains in the lab. Because what I hear is you can explain technical information to people who don't have your same level of training. And that means that if you're on my team, I can send you in there with the business unit and you can describe the data. And I don't necessarily have to worry that, you're taking them down way too many steps into a PCR reaction, right? And you're going to give them the highlights. So those are the things, if you get there, that's how you pitch your skill set. Bring samples of your writing. If you have done something outside of your typical manuscript, if you've written concise pieces of information or created labs for high school students, if you've done those things, have them in your pocket, because somebody like me will like, oh, let me see that. And I think that's it. Kimberly, did I miss anything there?
No, that was great. I think I'll just put maybe a little bit different way to think about personal branding as well, because this is fantastic advice. You need to be true to yourself. Like, don't become who you think the company wants to see or whoever you're applying. My experience with that is I didn't even realize I was kind of creating a brand for myself. But when I was working on my master's degree in organic chemistry, I wanted to keep coaching basketball. I had just gotten done playing in undergrad. I didn't want to let it go, and I got in trouble. My advisors did not want me to have any sort of distraction, but I stuck to my guns because that's who I was, right? If I think about my brand, I'm an athlete. I'm a scientist and an athlete. I'm not just a scientist. So when I went to get my PhD, I chose advisors. I learned my lesson from just doing it, on my own. And I said, this is who I am. I was always the kid in school who did better academically during season than without, right? Like, helps the focus. Give me a chance. Give me a chance to continue coaching and show you that I can do it. I can still do everything you need me to do academically. If I can't, great, I will set it aside, but give me the chance to do it. And I found the people who met my academic goals. I could do research in the areas that I wanted to, and would give me that chance. And it worked out great. I never had to step away. I showed them that I could do it. Then when I got this job, they told me the reason I was the one who offered the job is because I had a strong scientific background and I had a strong practical background, that I would understand the research subjects that we were going to be, that were in our studies, and the consumers. And so by sticking to that, to staying true to what my brand was, it helped me get my dream job, right? So you have to be who you are. And if your brand isn't the right fit for the company you're applying to, you probably don't want to be working there in the first place. So find that right fit, be you, and don't be afraid to stick to that. And you'll land in the place that's right for you.
That's awesome. I don't think we could have ended on a better note. I think that is really, really important advice. And I just want to take a moment to thank all of our panelists. You guys had some really great tidbits and a lot of helpful information. So I know I appreciate your expertise, and everyone on the call does. And it's just it's really helpful to get to know your career experiences. And I also want to thank the audience for attending today and all of the great questions. Again, key take up, no more blank LinkedIn requests. So we can go ahead and regroup, and we'll try to get some answers from the Q&A out to you guys. Before you all sign off, we hope that you take a few minutes to complete a short survey about this session and your interest in future webinars. So with that, we'll go ahead and sign off for the day, and thank you all so much.